far? What is he being charged with? Is the prosecution making the case? Well, we go to our expert friend, Will Chamberlain, joins us once again. He's a senior counsel at the Article 3 Project. You can find him on Twitter at Will Chamberlain. Will, thank you for being back with us. It's good to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Annie.
Of course. First and foremost, I want to ask you how the prosecution, Alvin Bragg and Alvin Bragg's team, how are they doing to prove whatever Donald Trump has been charged in what I've been told is the non-hush money trial in Manhattan? Are they making their case that Donald Trump committed a crime?
I mean, it's hard to say because we're not there, so we're not listening to the witness testimonies. I discussed with somebody else. We're getting bits and pieces and whatever the reporters who are sitting in the room are providing us. That said, I think that the fundamental problem, if they're actually trying to prove a crime by the elements, is that it's very challenging because the crime they've chosen to charge Donald Trump with is bizarre and kind of very out there. It's not only that supposedly he falsified financial records, but that he did so with some sort of fraudulent intent and the intent to commit another crime. And each of those is a distinct element that has to be proved. And from an objective standpoint, there's almost no way they can prove it.
So a question for you about the gag order, the fine that that was levied against him today for violating the gag order. I'm absolutely not a lawyer, and I'm so grateful when we have people like you to come on here and clarify some of these things. But this is a question I get a lot. I see a lot of people talking about it as well. Donald Trump himself. Donald Trump has a gag order on him. He's not allowed to talk about certain people who are involved in this trial. But a lot of people compare the Michael Cohen, out there being able to talk about whatever he wants, whenever he wants. Are they treated differently in this trial for a legal reason, or is this evidence of a political bias that one gets to talk and one can't?
No, there's no good legal reason for this. It's evidence of bias. The point of a fair trial is to protect the rights of the defendant, not to protect the rights of the judge or the rights of the prosecutor or the rights of the witnesses. And so, the gag order is just soundly unconstitutional, flagrantly so. It's preventing the president from speaking out about people who are speaking out about him, who are criticizing him in public. It's appalling. It's a First Amendment violation. Today's outcome is not surprising. The basic problem here is, President Trump did violate the gag order. The gag order is unconstitutional. It shouldn't have been imposed on him, but we can't be surprised that he violated it, given that it restricts his ability to speak out and criticize the lawfare against him.
So if he's found guilty of whatever it is that they're trying to prove that he's guilty of in this trial, and it goes up on appeal and he wins the appeal, does the gag order is that all collateral damage that he's just going to have to deal with as well?
There's probably an independent lawsuit you could file against the gag order because you could challenge the gag order independently of this lawsuit, and if it actually caused you real damage, it would be a restraining of your First Amendment rights, and if somebody violates your constitutional rights in a way that causes you damage, you can sue over that. But that's independent of the broader of the criminal trial itself.
So, okay, we're speaking with Will Chamberlain, senior counsel at the Article 3 Project, article3project.org to learn more. We did find out today that there was an ethics complaint filed against one of the lawyers that is bringing Jack Smith, is what I understand. What can you tell us about that ethics complaint, if it will carry any weight in any of the outcomes here for this lawfare that is being levied against Donald Trump?
Well, it's a straightforward complaint. There are two issues that were highlighted. The first is that Jack Smith is violating Justice Department policy and the Justice Department manual, and he's done so by taking a number of actions to try and move Donald Trump's trials before the November election. That's just not permissible. The Justice Department manual says you're not allowed to take any action to affect a presidential election. And his team has tried to say, oh, well, that only applies to the indictment. But a plain reading of that policy clearly indicates it applies to more than just an indictment. It applies to any action or statement by a prosecutor. And so we believe that Jack Smith has violated Justice Department policy. And I think that's what Elise Stefanik's complaint, makes clear. And then the second thing that is in that complaint is an issue of a rule violation of the rules of professional conduct. Jack Smith and his team kept litigating after a stay was imposed by the district court. You're not allowed to do that. And that violation is something that they should discipline. Now, the way this complaint works is it's filed with the Department of Justice itself, its own Office of Professional Responsibility. So, ultimately you're asking the Biden's DOJ to police itself. We don't know that they'll actually do that, but there's, Elise Stefanik was absolutely right to file that complaint and challenge the Department of Justice to, uphold its own standards and uphold the standards of professional responsibility.
We're speaking with senior counsel at the Article 3 Project, Will Chamberlain. The timeline you mentioned there about, Jack Smith trying to rush these things to happen. What, if you're seeking out justice, I would imagine that will happen in the natural course of time it takes to prove guilt or not successfully be able to prove the guilt of the defendant. But for some reason, the election seems to be the make it or break it time for the prosecution in all of these cases. So talk to me about if Donald Trump were to win the election in November, he obviously wouldn't become the president until January of 2025. What powers and authorities exist with the office of the presidency that make that election day such an important date for the prosecution to get Trump in time?
Well, I mean, once he's the president, he's the incoming head of the executive branch and the incoming superior to all the people who would be prosecuting him. There's a reason that the Office of Legal Counsel says you're not allowed to prosecute a sitting president. So, I mean, very likely it's hard to imagine a world where Donald Trump is actually elected president and any of these prosecutions are allowed to go forward. Either Trump will have the authority on his own accord to simply stop the prosecutions, or judges will quash them, saying that you're not allowed to prosecute the sitting head of the executive branch. That just makes no sense.
Would he have to be inaugurated before that would happen? Would they get that extra November, December part of?
I don't think so. I think that's where the judges would probably come in and put a stop to it. It's hard to imagine that, that guy would be coming in to be their boss and the head of the executive branch of the United States, and yet arms of the United States government would be trying to get the duly elected incoming president, the duly elected president-elect, and put in prison. It just wouldn't work, and it wouldn't make any sense. And I think that's why the liberal prosecutors are so obsessive about trying to get him convicted before the election.
Well, I hear, a lot of political pundits on television, of course, news anchors that are very allergic to the idea of Donald Trump winning another term, might accuse the Trump campaign of trying to stretch this out and, lengthen these trials out past Election Day so that what we're talking about here won't happen, that Donald Trump can't wave the magic presidential wand and make everything go away. Is it lengthening what Donald Trump is doing, or is it speeding what Jack Smith and the other people are doing? Like, what's the natural course of events in trials like these? What would the natural timeline be?
Well, the natural timeline here would have been years. I mean, there are still January 6th defendants who haven't been prosecuted. People who on the riot, and so the fact that those people were indicted years ago. So it can take a long time, and especially with a complex trial like this, where you're looking at millions of pages of documents. You would have been talking a trial date that was set 18 months at 2 years in advance, rather than 6 months away. It's really remarkable that Judge Chutkan even decided to indulge Jack Smith with such an aggressive timeline, and just underlying all this behavior by Democrat prosecutors and Democrat judges is the obvious effort to get Trump. And so not just unfair substantive rulings against the president, but these very unfair procedural rulings designed to rush this case to trial and treat it very differently than any other criminal case.
And isn't it safe to say, I could be completely missing the boat here, but it seems as though a lot of these trials could have been brought earlier if they wanted to make sure that their conclusion was arrived at before the election. But for some reason, the timing of bringing these charges seems to really butt up to the election. And that, my understanding, is based on when they chose to prosecute.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I mean, we have to remember that Donald Trump decided to announce he was running for president again back in December of 2022. And really all the indictments kicked into gear the following spring and summer.
Yeah. Amazing.
So you got to think that was the catalyst for all the prosecutors deciding to get going and get these indictments filed. Not necessarily the need to do justice, but the realization that Donald Trump could be president again, and their desire to stop that at any and all cost.
A final question here for you, senior counsel at the Article 3 Project, Will Chamberlain, with us. When you're surveying the whole lot of all of the lawsuits against Donald Trump right now, do you feel like there is one that is pending right now that seems like it might give the former president the most trouble?
I think the one that's pending is the one that the trial that he's in right now. I mean, every other case I think, has issues in terms of presidential immunity or the inadequacy of the prosecutors. But while Donald Trump's been doing really good on the federal cases and getting them delayed and creating all sorts of appellate issues, the New York trial is happening right now. He could be convicted of a felony within a month. And I think that's obviously the most pressing and the most serious problem that we're dealing with.
Well, we'll continue to watch it. And we're very grateful for your time today, Will Chamberlain. Thank you for being with us.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Bye-bye.